It's not only is selling a transfer of enthusiasm, most of the sales that we make in a day, in a week, in our lives don't even involve the exchange of money. My daughter's 16. She asks for the keys to the car. She's making a sales call. If I give the keys to the car to her, she's made a sale. In a way, that makes me her customer, which means she better earn the right to make that sales call again. You think about infants. The close rate when an infant wants something is through the roof. They let you know. Sales calls don't even need words.
And now the man you've been waiting for. He is the real Thrilla in Manila. The undisputed, undefeated, reigning, defending, pound for pound, heavyweight John, the sales machine, Rankins.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got a treat for you today. My guest today is Jeff Bajorek, a guy who's been in the sales game for over 20 years. He's done over 1,000 podcasts, and he has the scars to prove it. He's taken dead territories and turned them into multi-million-dollar machines, just like the sales machine. He's coached sales teams across 60 different companies and literally written the book on prospecting and selling. Jeff's done keynotes, workshops. He's been on over 1,000 podcasts, like I said, and he's the kind of guy who doesn't just talk about sales, he lives it. We're going to dig deep into how he builds real relationships, gets teams to sell the right way, and what it takes to thrive in today's cutthroat market. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Jeff. I'm here to show up and serve. I'm not here to impress you. I know it's not easy, writing books, building Courseware, and developing sales process for different industries and different levels of sales, whether it's B2B, B2C, fast-moving consumer goods. Like I've been through the realm of door-to-door sales, kiosk sales, boardroom sales, selling from the stage, one-on-one, one-on-many.
When they say selling is selling, I believe it. But the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize that there are important differences between each of the channels that you just mentioned. Do you still have to get someone's attention? Yes. Do you still have to communicate your value? Yes. Do you still have to ask for next steps? Yes. All of those things. And the simple moving of prospects through those stages. And some companies have 12 stages in their sales processes. Some companies have 3. Some have 3, but it takes 12 meetings to get them there. Some have, 2-minute, sales calls to close, right? Selling at its core is service, as you mentioned. It is still moving people through that journey, but there really is a lot of nuance to it now. And some things do not apply the same way in different venues like that. And I'm just curious, you've been doing this, you mentioned 30 years now. Like how many times, how do you feel about that? How do you feel when people say selling is selling?
For me, selling is an exchange of value, first and foremost. And how do we add value to people's lives? For me, it's service, solving problems, and making sure that they're satisfied, because wealth is created not by a one-off sale. It's created by long-term relationships. Would you say I can happily jump on a phone and have conversations with a lot of the guys that have been on your podcast, John, because, we're in the same industry. We work together and we do referrals. And obviously you've worked with Alan Versteeg, who's, been a great colleague and resource for me. So selling is not telling. Selling is service. So how can I take you from where you're at to where you want to be?
I listened to, early in my career, back when you still had CD players in cars, I listened to a program called The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. And Brian Tracy said that a sale is nothing more than a transfer of enthusiasm from one party to another. And at the time, I was helping a company of non-sales sales professionals, if you follow the Dan Pink logic. And they were really struggling with this idea that they needed to be in sales in order to grow their business. They were business owners. And, but no. Sales is a 4-letter word, despite the fact that there are 5 letters in it, right? And I said, look, it's not only is selling a transfer of enthusiasm, most of the sales that we make in a day, in a week, in our lives don't even involve the exchange of money. My daughter's 16. She asks for the keys to the car. She's making a sales call. If I give the keys to the car to her, she's made a sale. In a way, that makes me her customer, which means she better earn the right to make that sales call again. You think about infants. The close rate when an infant wants something is through the roof. They let you know. Sales calls don't even need words, right? I mean, you think about that transfer of enthusiasm. You think about any time, John, you asked me to come on your podcast. You made a sales call. I agreed, right? You made a sale. Anytime we ask somebody to do something that they wouldn't have done if it weren't for us asking, you're making a sales call. Now, the flip of that is when you make that sale, when they do that thing, they're your customer. Are you treating every person that you ask for something from? Are you treating them like they could be your best customer? There's a lot of us walking around the world right now, and we're not all going to agree on everything. We're not supposed to agree on everything. That's not what it's about. But if we all thought of each other as potentially our best customer, we would treat each other with a little bit more respect. We'd have a lot more empathy. We'd listen more. We'd seek to understand before we sought to be understood. Like all this stuff works together. And so when I think about sales, that's where I go. I think about all of us together on this rock hurtling through space at completely unbelievable speeds, right? We're in this together to make change, to serve, to solve problems. But to go back to the original question I asked you, I think selling is selling on that kind of a scale. But as I've gotten further in my career, as I've worked with more and more customers and clients and things like that, really appreciating the nuance of each individual sector of our profession. In some ways, you want to hold on to margin as much as possible. In other places, I had a client that I worked with recently. They said, Jeff, if our reps, if their gross margin percentage on the products that they're selling is too high, that actually tells me that they're not going up against big enough deals. They're not trying to serve larger companies. We know we have our pricing at a certain level for a certain size company, but we also know that we need to give discounts for volume. And if people are fighting margin, chances are they're not chasing big enough deals. I said, wow, that's a paradigm that took me 20 years to learn. Interesting. So, there's where you grew up in this industry, I think means something. So it is worth something.
I agree. And, a lot of it is a tactical mindset rather than it being a strategic mindset. Because, ultimately, I was reading an article yesterday, and I still am a student of the game. I love to learn. I love spending time hearing other people's psychology, studying their methodology. My next level sales framework is literally about needs, economic impact, X factors. And you better handle those before the timing of giving an offer. Otherwise, you're going to be right back where you started. Mm-hmm. And it's about transforming. So everything is about making a sale and positioning yourself, for me, for adding value. So, I was reading yesterday that what changed the game for Salesforce was signing Toyota as one of their first customers. Because once it was good enough for Toyota, that was the tipping point. And, I've heard there's a lot of internet marketers and different kinds of industries out there, and good on them. But ultimately, they'll talk about give something away for free. So like to secure a huge client, there's going to be a residual effect. So potentially, you don't need all that margin. You can discount a margin to get an industry leader, and then the dominoes will fall. Mm-hmm. So that's a strategic move, and it's still selling.
You bring up an interesting concept there, though. The idea of a give to get. We're giving up some margin in order to get Toyota because we believe that a company the size and with the brand of Toyota, we can use that social proof and leverage it to knock down a lot of other customer opportunities. That is strategy. That is forethought. That is intelligence. The problem is that there are all those internet marketers out there saying, just give something away for free. And average person who pays attention to internet marketers says, yeah, okay, just give it away for free. And, orders will start coming in. You got to spend money to make money, right? Two totally different pieces of advice. you've smashed them together. Now you're in a lot of debt and you're no better off. You haven't even probably learned much.
I'll tell you a story. You know, you hear of these tripwires and lead magnets, and it's a whole different arena besides like when you talk about tripwires, lead magnets. And like I said, I've done all kinds of different sales and ran different companies. And ultimately, you got to attract, influence, convert, and elevate clients. I call it ICE, right? To be successful long term. And so that strategic play, as an example for Toyota, if you work on smaller margins, can lead to other opportunities, first of all. Second, that could be just a core offer and you can upsell. Like we have advanced analytics and business intelligence on top of our software. So, you know, there's an entry level offer, and then we look at what their numbers are and we say, hey, imagine if we could do this for you and it would cut your cost by 20%. Once we put AI in there, we can increase your productivity by 11% based on what we've done. That's a whole different ballgame. And I learned sales and I heard about these free offers. I'm 56 and I learned sales for the first time by my brother pushing me to these doors to ask to mow their lawns and cut their weeds. And my older brother was afraid to do it. And so he's like, go do it.
So
And
you do it.
Yeah, he's like, that's exactly it. You do it, right? So I didn't know he was doing me a favor. I was like, okay. And he's 3.5 years older than me. So I kind of listened to my older brother. So I just knock on the door. Hey, we noticed your grass is getting tall. Anyway, that experience went to me becoming a newspaper boy. And the reason why I share that is because I took over a route that had like 89 newspapers. And that wasn't a lot. And they had contests and all of these different opportunities to grow the route. And so I had to go out and look for subscribers. So I'd knock on the doors and I'd say, hey, I'm with the Daily News in little Caney, Kansas, right? Population 5,000. And they're like, no. And I heard all these objections about why they didn't want the paper. No, it's always in the rain, or you never put it on the porch. I can't find it. It's inconsistent. And after a while, I kept hearing all these objections. They became common. So I identified all these objections and said, I just changed the way I approached every customer and said, hey, I'm here with the Daily News, and we are going through all of Caney and offering you a free month subscription. Put it in on your door or in your screen door, in your mailbox, guaranteed every single day. And if you're not happy, you don't have to renew. I got 190 new subscribers. I won a boat. I won walkie-talkies. Wow. So that's a free offer. That was just being strategic, handling objections. Right. And I was 13. Right. And then everybody talks about the free offer. That's just being strategic. And what was I actually doing? And I love to go back to the Bible for references. Give and you shall receive. Right. And basically I was just being in service. So that's how I see sales. I see sales as it's something I'm doing for you, not to you. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love the methodology of growth matters. And I know if you've worked with Alan, and I already know we resonate with the same psychology. It's about doing something for others because we're on this rock speeding through space and God knows how fast, like you said. But yeah, I'm digging this, Jeff, because so many people out there really show up to try to impress. Right? And then they end up in duress because all they talk about is themselves, and they end up becoming on the defense, right? Defending their product, their service, their company, rather than just listening and figuring out how to help people.
It's the ego getting in our way again.
Yeah, that's happened to me. I got to tell you. And it has, Has it ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's happened to me. I mean, in a lot of different ways. You think you're here to do something. You think you're here to do something noble. You think you're here to do something that's going to help people, but you present it the wrong way, or, good intentions that just, you miscalculate your delivery. Maybe you think a little too highly of yourself. Maybe you misunderstand the assignment. I mean, there are a lot of times where that's happened to me. And it's funny. You learned to sell because your older brother pushed you out the front door and told you to go talk to all the neighbors. I'm curious how much a commission that he took off of your hard work, but I like to say,
I mow the lawns.
Oh, okay. All right. So he wasn't just, pushing you out there and then taking a cut off the top as your agent. But I jokingly like to say that I learned to sell by drinking beer. Got a job, my first sales job, reluctantly, took the suggestion to take it, figured, well, if I hate this, I'll go back to what I'm doing, but this seems fun. Let me try this. Right. And it wasn't until, a good friend of mine still to this day who could kind of take me under his wing and mentor me that I really learned what to do, what not to do. And I learned which assumptions to make and go with and which assumptions to never make again. Right. And the beer part was, just kind of comical, but, he would come into town and ride with me a couple of days a week. We'd get in the car, we'd meet for coffee somewhere. We'd get in the car. What are we doing today? Okay. We're going to talk to this person, this person, this person. All right. We'd have our day. Sometimes we could ride together. Sometimes it didn't make sense to. And then, more often than not, at the end of the day, we'd belly up to some table somewhere, have a beverage, and talk about what happened. And the beer was secondary, right? But it was like, okay, hey, Jeff, do you remember what she did when you said that? Okay, don't say that ever again. We didn't like that reaction. Don't say that ever again, right? But did you see what she did when you said this? Yeah, please say more of that. Why? Why does this work? Why does this not work? Okay, before the next call, what do you need to do to make sure that we're ready for the next call? What's the next thing that we're going to ask for when we go to that call? What do we have to do behind the scenes? Jeff, what do you need from me? Here's what I need from you. And we sold together, and I learned all the ins and outs. And I learned that a lot of the assumptions that I made were not very good. But I also learned to trust my intuition and to read people. And that sometimes, humor is the best way, to get a conversation going, even with the serious person. And sometimes even when there's something really funny to say, you can't make that person laugh because we really need to be a little more solemn in this way. And so I learned by reviewing the tape. I learned by having someone who knew what they were doing, figuratively put their arm around me and show me the horizon, what we were trying to accomplish. And, I think of selling less of a career and more of it requires an apprenticeship. It's a craft. It's a trade. It's something, these are skills that you hone over time, the skills that you hone over decades. We've both been doing this, 20, 30 years. There's some things that I know how to do that you will never read in a book. Yeah. And I'm sure you can say the same thing. And it's funny. I was with a client. I was leading a session with a client. And just last week, the guy raises his hand. He says, whoa, hold on. What did you just say? That again? I can't write fast enough. Say that again. I said, I can't. And he's like, oh, don't hold off. Don't hold back. I mean, no, Rick, I can't. I don't know what I just said. I know what I intended to convey, but I do not know the words that I used. I mean, look, this thing is recorded. I'll have it up to you. You can go back and reread it, read the transcript, copy, paste it. I don't care. Use it for your own script, but I don't know what I'm going to say half the time, but I do know what I mean to convey. Those are the things that, try putting that in a book. Try putting that on a lead magnet to attract someone to your website, right? Like those are the little in-between things that come along with a relative amount of mastery, not something you can just write on a sticky note on your computer so that you can remember to say it the next time someone actually answers the phone when you call.
Yeah, I tried getting AI to go into a boardroom and read the room with all the different stakeholders. And not just read the room, but read the man. That's not happening anytime soon. And that's where I feel people get lost. They show up to impress and end up in duress rather than show up in service and figure out how you can help.
Right.
And you're right. If you try to be humorous to somebody who's not interested, who's stressed out, limited for time, needs to make a decision, and a lot of the C-suite, that's the position they're in, and or there's a lot of status quo out there that, if they make a change in their business, if they purchase something that's going to change the dynamics of the operations and or the process in sales, it's their head. It's not thought through when you're just showing up. Whenever I train anybody, I got to tell you, I'm basically a sales trainer. I own my own company. I've managed 2,000 to 3,000 sales reps selling my own products, skincare, car care, now software. I'm in service to them, providing them opportunity to go from ordinary to extraordinary. But I'm selling to them as much as we're selling products and delivering value to the market. And they're my market because I offer them opportunity, car programs, house programs, how to go from ordinary to extraordinary. That's a sale in itself, providing an opportunity, all commission based, a very big, different arena. And what I've found is that when you come from service, it's just so much easier. And I've changed so many people's psychology about sales. And the first thing I do when I train a group of people, I don't care if it's 3 people or it's 300, is I go to the front of the room. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your service. Nobody cares about your hair, Jeff. You're a good looking guy, but nobody cares. And so I just want to give you the memo right off the bat. Don't make it about you. And it's not about you. It's not about rejection. They don't know you. Like if you ever got a text, I got a text about 4 weeks ago. Some anonymous woman, I don't know, I didn't add her as a friend or something. And I got a family. This is my family right behind me. Sends me a text. You are a bastard. And just berated. I read the text. I literally laughed for 3 minutes because I like, what the? This is amazing. I have no idea who this person is. Totally berating me. The way I received it, it was the funniest thing I ever heard in my life. Like nobody cares. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care if someone's berating me. I don't know you. I'm not doing anything bad to anyone. Right. And so I don't feel rejected.
Right.
People say no. It's really simple. If you say no to me, potentially it's because you don't know enough about my product or service. Or I don't know enough about what is the problems or the challenges that you have in your business. I didn't do enough discovery to figure those out. So that's on me. Because if you're walking away, and like you talk about the assumption gig, right? No to me means in door-to-door sales, next opportunity. I've got to move on, baby. I need to see 150 to 200 people a day. If they're saying no, it's because I didn't get to know enough about them, their products, their challenges for me to solve them, or they don't know enough about our service of how we can make a difference. So the no's are great. That's an indicator I need to get better. Empathy and or discovering how we can really help. There's not many sales leaders out there. Actually, there are a lot of sales leaders out there that understand this, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're talking per capita, there's very few of us.
I would agree. I think there are a lot of people who think that they're doing the right thing. I think that there are a lot of people out there who believe that because it was done to them that way, that's the way you're supposed to do it. I call it generational sales manager trauma. It's
GSMT. You got GSMT. Oh my God.
but it's, hey, my manager micromanaged me, so I'm going to do that to you. It's waited my turn. I played the game. I paid my dues. I took the crap from, the leaders above me. And now I've, either in spite of them or because of them, I'm in the position that I am right now. And now it's my turn to deal that punishment right back to you. And it's like, just because that's the way a lot of people do it, does that mean that that's the right way to do it? Again, you get back to critical thinking. You get back to nobody cares. You get back to what you just mentioned, a couple of minutes ago. Like, okay, these people that I'm leading, these couple thousand people that I'm leading, yeah, they're my customers. I have to think of them like customers. What's going to be in their best interest so that they're going to actually go out there and do what I need them to do in order to support themselves and ultimately this company. It's got to be a win-win. And so in the same way, if they ever want something from you, they need to understand. If they want a raise, they need to justify to you why they're worth paying more, right? I mean, everything goes both ways. And I don't think a lot of people see it that way. And what's really interesting, and I think this is changing, and I don't know about you, John, you've got a young family, I've got a young family, but because I said so doesn't fly in my house the way it did when I was growing up.
My son's in Montessori school. He can already negotiate. You talk about sales skills. 1 no, 2 no. Like, he'll go through different scenarios and use different approaches no matter what. When him and his mom go to a store, he's coming home with something because she will crack. She will break. He will negotiate. And no matter what, he'll start big when all he wanted was something even small. It's like a little game he plays. But no, they teach him to think. Like, in Montessori, they throw him in a class. And this was so important to me because I'm a fan of Blair Singer, Robert Kiyosaki, as far as accelerated learning, self-discovery, self-help, figuring things out and coming from service. Back to Zig Ziglar. Anyway, Montessori, literally, they put them in a class, but you choose your project. My kid's learning algebra in the first grade, right? And using different geometrical puzzles to understand geometry. And they choose a project. They're shown how to do it. Then they leave them, and then they have to do it. And they work on that project, whether they finish it in a day or a week, they have to finish it. They're taught how to think. They're left to figure shit out because everything is figure-outable, right? So they're not put behind a desk and get in line and here's the textbook. There's going to be a test. No, all of the different science projects, all the different math projects, everything. Here's a puzzle to understand how the thing works. Here's it done. So here's the answers to all the tests. Here's how it works. Now we're going to take it all apart. You go figure it out. And you know it? The kids figure it out. Apprenticeship. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. And I think I learned a long time ago that young people, I think all people, but especially young people, will meet the standard that you set for them. If provided the right support system, if provided the right ecosystem of psychological safety and encouragement and things like that, you can put some really tough challenges in front of somebody. And they will rise to that challenge. And the tough part is getting the second half of that right, which is, are we providing an environment where they can actually execute? I run into, I've got a couple of clients right now. One called me up and said, Jeff, my team needs training, but they don't want it. Sounds about right. It's not the first time I've ever heard that, but why don't we dig into why you don't think they want it? Why don't we take a look at the entire organization? Like, I can deliver training, but quite frankly, what are we delivering here? Let's do a little discovery. Another client said, yeah, this is going to be a challenge though, because we've got a lot of different personalities here and some different locations and this is going to be a challenge. And it's like, okay, but we have to give them training. Yeah, you do. But again, like, what are we training on? And is training really the fix for the problem? Or is that the last button that you have left to push? Like I mentioned, I had another client that, well, they're not going to want sales training because they don't think they're in sales. Okay, well, it sounds, Mr. CEO, like we have a sale to make. We need them to understand what the homework assignment is so that we can, get them to come to a place where they want to learn. And that's the thing. I think, providing that environment, and you talk about Stephen Covey and seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's like, let's think about what we have to talk about first before we just apply training. Let's invite those people that eventually need to be trained. Let's invite them to the discussion. Let's have them participate in the solution. Let's not just say, hey, look, we put you in this position because we believe in you, even though we haven't given you any of the resources to support that belief. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to bring this person in and they're going to talk at you for an hour a week, every week for 6 months, and we're going to pay them a bunch of money and you're going to learn these lessons, right? It's like, that is an improper use of resources. That is a waste of money in many cases.
It's 100% waste of money because they're not sold.
No.
You need to sell them on why they need the training. And it's not just about selling them on why they need the training. It's showing them what's possible so that they're enrolled. And you're basically doing discovery with the salespeople. So what do you guys think we need to do as a company to accelerate your opportunity, to get you guys making more money, to improve the products, the offers? What do we need to do for you, for us to all to thrive? So I love that psychology. It's enrollment and that's Socratic leadership rather than being autocratic. And autocratic, yeah, it works in the military. I know.
Where people are compelled to actually do what?
Well, you're compelled to fucking do what I say or we're all going to die. Right? Like I had to learn everybody else's job on a nuclear powered submarine that we used to poke holes in the ocean and basically just spy on Russia. That was 30 years ago. And guess what? We're still doing it. So autocracy, it has a fucking place in the military, but not in the business world, especially with the new generation. And we all know that great times create weak people. Weak people create tough times. Tough times create strong people. And then the strong people create great times.
Right.
And we're all back to now a new weak generation. Unless you get out of that soup bowl. I love how you said if you bring up people in the right environment. That wasn't my environment. Not even close. But I'm not stupid. I see the world. When I was a paper boy, being raised by a single mom and went through all kinds of trauma. I'm talking stupid, sick shit. But I was a paper boy and I could go door to door and I could see stable families, Christmas trees, people singing carols, gifts under the tree, people inviting me in. I made more in tips than I did from that paper route. And they invited me into their homes and I saw normalcy. And I knew that when I have a family, it's not going to be like what I was shown because I choose. I get to choose, no one else. So my boy's in Taekwondo. He's got his blue belt. And I use encouragement, but he doesn't deal with any instability shit. Right? And then he comes to me and says, Dad, I want to play guitar. I'm like, what? You're 7, dude. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's like, will you buy me a guitar? He goes on for weeks. And I'm like, I'm not cracking. I'm not your mom. I love you. And it's not a no. But guess what? Here's the deal. You do 8 lessons and you show me that you're committed and you go through the 8 lessons. And when you're done, I'll get you a guitar. Now he's on like, I don't know, 40, 50 lessons. And he can play Chris Stapleton's Tennessee Whiskey. Like, I don't know.
Sure.
My son likes this country music, probably because he hears his mom and I playing it. So he learns those songs, Country Road, and in the proper environment. And I don't think people understand that enough when you're developing and leading and scaling sales teams. And you wrote books on it. I deal with a lot of engineers now, tech leaders and stuff like that. I have a team of over 20 that maintain and scale and automate my software. So we help people and companies increase their sales with automations with our software. Not like Salesforce or HubSpot. Those things are difficult. Ours is simple. And it's just simple. Those are old legacy, hard to use systems. So we increase your sales, and then we drive performance because no more admin for the salesperson. Like I can do everything with note taker, AI, everything. So all they're doing is selling. You don't have to be a genius to know I can increase your performance if salespeople don't have to do nonsense. And then I can cut your cost because I'm a fraction. The investment is a fraction of the cost of all this old legacy software. That's, by the way, complicated and most salespeople hate and don't want to use. And that's what I know. But the engineers want to tell me how to develop the software, I don't care how you develop it, as long as it fulfills the needs of my people to give them automation, AI to give them feedback, to give the sales leader feedback. Are they using the next level framework? Are not using BANT. I don't use BANT. Hey, you got a budget? Hey, Paul, Jeff, you got a budget? You don't call somebody and say, hey, you got any money? BANT. No, I use ANT. So am I talking to an authority? Do they have a need? Do they have a timeline? And do they have a system or not? Because,
Sure.
I need to know about the ants in their company, right? So they say to me, where do we begin? I said, just follow along. Everything begins with prospecting. Everything. I don't care if it's inbound leads, outbound leads, everything in sales begins with prospecting. And you wrote a book on it.
I did.
How did it come about that you said, you know what? Enough is enough. I keep having to say the same thing. I'm going to document this, systemize it. And then you went on to build Courseware around it. Let's get into that, because that is what's game changer of how a sales leader leads, by designing frameworks.
There are a lot of things out there, a lot of books out there. I'm not the first person to come and, pretend to know something about prospecting, right? And, I was really thinking about, what do I need to talk about? How do I get people to think differently? That's one of my trademarks, which is rethink the way you sell. And so what I try to do is step back and think, okay, what's prospecting really all about? And I came up with 5 things. And that is, know what you bring to the table, know who you should be talking to. You need to create tension, which is that emotional part of the sale. You need to demonstrate some kind of expertise, and you need to keep your swagger, because it's hard. You're going to have people sending you texts that say you're nasty things about your parents and that they don't ever want to hear from you again, and that kind of thing, right? And I don't think it's
parents. Nice try, big guy.
It's not always about handling rejection, right? I think we need to reevaluate our complicated relationship with rejection. We need to reevaluate our complicated feelings with failure. But it's about seeing a bigger picture, right? And that's what swagger is all about. And I always end my, my keynotes with a note about swagger. I always end my training engagements and my lessons with something about keeping your swagger in your mindset. But, look, know what you bring to the table. What makes you different? What makes that valuable, and why does it matter? Because, look, if I'm different than the next guy, you and I can have a conversation about that. And conversations lead to sales conversations, which lead to sales. But if I come out and I just say, and I lead with my ego, and I say, I'm better than the next guy. Well, if you really like the next guy,
a guy like that.
Exactly. We're not going to start a conversation. We're going to start an argument. So I can get a customer, and I learned this early on. There were customers that I had to sell to that I knew would never buy from me. One of the things my mentor told me, he said, look, there are people that you need to sell. There are people who you will never be able to sell. And in the middle, there are people who you need to neutralize, because even though they will never buy, they can kill your deal. And so we had an approach, and I got my sales career started in medical devices, and I was selling implants. And, sometimes those people, I knew they were, with a company, they were design surgeons. They had relationships. I wasn't going to break through. It's almost like, having your nephew be your rep, right? You're not breaking that relationship. But I could go in and I could ask for an objective opinion on a new design rationale, and I could start a conversation. And there were a lot of times where that surgeon would say, you know what? That's a really nice feature. I'm never going to buy it, but I like what you're doing. That was a win. That was a win. And sometimes I'd get really good feedback about why he would never buy it or she would never buy it. Orthopedic surgeons are like 97% males, so it's normally a guy. But I would learn. But when you talk about why you're different, then you can start to extract a value proposition from that. And you can start to talk about the outcomes that your value proposition creates. Know who you should be talking to. And I learned this from Jeffrey Gitomer. Who are they? Why would they buy? And why wouldn't they buy? Sometimes the best feeling in the world, and I knew this because I got in my car every day and I drove past some customers to get to others. You get that little anxiety when, that exit on the freeway goes to that place. You're like, man, I hate going in there because I never get anywhere and whatever. Well, you know what? When there's a real bona fide, undeniable reason why they will not buy from you, you can let your guard down and be okay with driving past them, hopefully to someone who will buy from you. You know this, door to door. There were a couple people on your route. If you had 190 homes on your route, there were a couple people on your route. You didn't even bother. And you still got a little bit, the hair still stood up on the back of your neck when you were riding your bike by that house. You're like, man, she yelled at me. She threatened to hit me with my own paper.
Dogs, at the bottom of the street. I'm like, okay, I got to get enough speed with these bags on me. And I got to get enough speed to outrun these dogs because that fucking dog always tries to bite me. And I would have to generate momentum, and every day that dog kept me fit. I had Jeff on the podcast. I have a copy of his book, The Sales Bible, with a floppy disk and the flashcards. And I showed him it, and he goes, "Where did you get that?" Right? And I'm like, man, I've had this thing for 20 years. What's brilliant about it, you talk about swag. You open the book, and the first thing it says is, "Thanks, I just made a sale." Swagger, baby. Jeffrey's got it.
Oh, in spades. In spades. Still to this day.
And he's all about service, right? And he's all 100%. About giving, and you shall receive. Like, he goes in and does stuff for people. But nothing is going to take the place of actually doing the work. So many people are chasing greatness. I hung out with Tim Grover. If you know Tim Grover, he's Kobe Bryant's coach and Michael Jordan's coach. And Dwayne Wade. And he said, nobody like Jordan and Kobe. Nobody. They play practice like it's a real game. They pushed themselves to greatness. And today, so many people are out there chasing greatness, and they haven't even got good at good because they're unwilling to do the work. They want instant results. You don't get nutrition. You don't get fortified with instant noodles. Doesn't work that way. You got to do the work. And I could not agree more, because doing the work, as long as you're in the right environment, and if you're not, leave.
Yeah, you don't have to be in that environment.
Yeah, there's an old comedian, Sam Kinison, he died. He goes, I don't understand why these people in Africa just don't move to where the food is. You talked about rethinking the way you sell. But how did you get into building the courseware of prospecting?
Again, really just kind of stepping back a little bit and trying to make it accessible so that people could think about it on a different level. Earlier, when we talked about what my definition of a sale is, it's a transfer of enthusiasm, but it's also, if we think about anytime we ask somebody to do something that's a sales call, It's like, okay, what's a framework that non-salespeople can find themselves in? What's a framework that someone who's experienced in selling can take a step back and say, oh, okay, that's the macro there. Because I think, you're what you just said, people are trying to be great and they're not very good at even being good just yet. We have to get the fundamentals right. We have to get the not necessarily the frameworks, but we need to do the big things right first. Before you worry about all your micronutrients, make sure you're getting enough protein, the right amount of fat, and the right kind of carbs, right? Like, let's get the macros right. And so what I tried to do was step back and distill prospecting to some principles that are the macros, right? So that's where it's like, okay, what makes you different? Let's lean into the things that'll start conversations, not arguments. Let's get people to think a little bit differently. Let's make sure those are the right people. A lot of people, a lot of clients that I work with, their team is not succeeding because they're not calling on the right people for the right reasons. They're calling on people who look like they could be customers, but they haven't thought about whether or not they could be good customers. They haven't thought about why those customers would buy, right? And then, you get into the other 5 fundamentals, create tension. People buy emotionally before they justify that purchase logically. You just spouting off features and benefits that they don't understand what they mean, especially with all the tech and the AI. People are terrified by AI. If you want to sell them AI, the first thing you have to do is make them feel safe that the computer isn't going to take over their home and hold their families hostage, at gunpoint, right? We've all seen too many science fiction movies. So it's like we have to think about the emotions involved. We have to tie those emotions to a goal that they're trying to accomplish, something that's going to leave them better off and hopefully reduce some of the risk and the fear that they have. You have to be someone who demonstrates that you know something that they don't know and that it's going to help them. And, where I think about this, I go back to, have something worth talking about and be someone worth talking to about it. If you don't cover those things, if you just pick up a phone and start dialing, reading from a script, you can succeed as a telemarketer, and there is room in the world for telemarketers, but that's not what most B2B salespeople are. The problem is they're cosplaying as B2B salespeople while acting as telemarketers. Those 2 approaches just don't work. And, so you have to know these fundamentals. So, beyond those fundamentals, and that's where the workshops came from. And I've got some videos out there that you can watch and kind of get them. And I've done some things with my podcast over the last couple of years to get into this stuff, but I've done over 1,000 podcast episodes. Yeah.
Amen, man. I think this is like, I've only been doing it a year and a year and a half. This is like episode 107 because I do the work.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I just started, really.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Cheers to you. I started, my first podcast was in 2017, I think. And we did 532 episodes of that show. I've got another couple hundred of my own with the Rethink the Way You Sell podcast. And I've got, I've been on so many other shows. People ask me to guest. And so, yeah, I'll come on. I'll have a conversation. Let's talk. Maybe I'll say something smart. And at least someone will be around to record it. But that's the thing. Like I told you before, I learned to sell by drinking beer because we had conversations. The beer was just the vehicle, the medium, the conduit for the conversation. Sometimes there was no beer. Sometimes it was just the boardroom or the conference room after the trainer left. And it was just me and a handful of my colleagues talking about, what we thought was going to work, what wasn't working, et cetera. I remember all the time I spent behind my windshield, and I worked in a territory and I was for a long time the only employee in the state of Michigan, but I had reps in other states that I had on speed dial. And I knew they were in their car as probably the only employees in their states too. And we were out there, we're sharing with each other. And I believe that, and it goes right along with the apprenticeship, craftsman concept. Salespeople get better when they talk to other salespeople. They get better faster when they challenge each other to think differently. And
I could not agree more.
So that's why I like doing podcasts. That's why I do a lot of shows. And that's why I really like to challenge long-held beliefs with principles, because they start conversations. It doesn't happen all the time, fortunately, but there are times in the rooms that I lead where people will push back. And I invite that. I try not to incite it, but I invite it, because it's like, look, we are, first of all, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Just because you and I disagree on how to do it doesn't mean that your way won't work. It doesn't mean that my way won't work. But when we discuss how each of our points of view, although different, are still somehow both true, we all get a little closer to the truth. And then there's somebody else in that room who's going to say, I get that now in a way I didn't before. The light bulb goes on, and then they go make a sale they weren't going to make. That's how I elevate my rooms.
I love how you elevate your room. And, I love getting pushback, because ultimately I see it as an opportunity. So interesting you see it that way. Because now, interesting that you see it that way. Tell me more. And how have you made that successful for you? Because some people have a different model of the world. Their truth is their truth. It doesn't mean it's fact. It can be working for them, and potentially it could be an add-on to work for me and or others. So that's how you bring out the greatness of everybody, and you develop best practices, is find out what everybody else is doing that potentially works. And there's so many different frameworks out there. Initially, when I got into software, Jeff, I had no idea what was an SDR. I didn't know what a business development manager was. I didn't know how to do discovery. I didn't know how to properly do demos. I didn't know you never do a demo until you've done discovery. Otherwise, you're showing up and throwing up all over your client. You have commission breath. I didn't know any of this stuff. Now, I knew about commission breath and showing up and throwing up, but direct sales is, you want it or not, I got to go. Look, exactly. In the store, it's $50. Today, these fell off a truck. It's $10. Check it out.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm sales. And I would get 30 to 50 sales a day. Rock on, player. And I would run all day. But then it changed. When I started selling skincare, all of a sudden, this goes on your face. Nobody's buying skincare. Hey, it was $50 in the store. It's $10 today. They might buy some perfume, but they ain't buying no skincare. Different game. ADT alarms. I'm not selling you on an alarm. I'm selling you on 10 houses got ripped off in your area today. Do you have anything here to protect your family? It changes. So there's some people out there talking about the buyer's journey. Some talking about the seller's journey. Different models of the world, right? There's people saying that, spin selling is the holy grail. And then others say medic. Some say neat selling. My team's going to tell you next level sales is all about helping others. There's just so many frameworks.
They all overlap in a lot of places. I look for the overlap, because what they all get right is probably the closest thing to the truth we have. And then I start at the truth and I build from there. That's what I consider my foundation. That's what I've always done.
Yeah, for me too. I try to understand the product, the industry, the methodology, what are the best practices of the best people and or not, and figure out step by step, little by little, every day in the organization, what is the macros, and then what are the fundamentals that are actually sales generating activities that need to be done, not admin. But I love what Aaron Ross said from Salesforce. He has outbound 2.0, predictable revenue. So you find out about your prospect, you find out who's in charge, you find out about industry pains, and then you reach out knowing something about them rather than going cold. And now you're not doing telemarketing. You've already did discovery. You've already did some work to add value.
Yep.
This has been brilliant, Jeff. Are you actively taking on clients and working with companies? Where do people find you, and how do they work with you? And can they buy your courses? And is it all consultative selling?
Yeah, what I do, every training program I put together is bespoke for the company that I build it for. So I work with a small amount of companies at the same time. You can learn more about me at jeffbajorek.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. Tell me you heard me on this show. That'll be helpful, and we'll happy to pick up that conversation. But yeah, I'm taking on new clients, and yeah, I've had a lot of fun today, John. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad we could put this together.
Hey, Jeff, you're brilliant, man. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com, click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.